Hello everybody, we're here for part 3. Part 2 just ended with the French Revolution answering this question, so we're going to move on to part 3. So with part 3, we're going to talk about the king, okay? So here you have a lovely picture of our beautiful King Louis XVI. To explain here at the beginning, failure to reform. The heirs for King Louis XIV were not the right men to solve the economic crisis that was happening in France at the time. So we remember that we were talking about how wages are being cut from people while bread prices are rising, right? So once King Louis XIV stepped out, King Louis XV came, and then King Louis XVI came. King Louis XVI is the guy in this picture. King Louis XVI was kind of a funny character because he was well-meaning, but he was very weak and indecisive. He wasn't very confident in his kingship. He was pretty young. At the end of 1788, France was on the verge of bankruptcy, meaning that they weren't going to have enough money. Bread riots were spreading. King Louis XVI, he wanted to have an Estates General. So I'll explain here in a second what an Estates General is. But one thing that I always remember, or that helped me remember, of who King Louis XVI was, I always think of him as young, kind of irresponsible, sort of immature. And the way that I remember King Louis XVI, I think about like someone that's 16 years old, or like they're sweet 16. They're sort of like just wanting to party, sort of irresponsible, immature. So if it helps you remember King Louis XVI, think of like sweet 16, maybe like teenager, sort of like irresponsible. That always helped me in high school to remember. So King Louis, he called up what was called an Estates General to meet in the Palace of Versailles. Not in the palace, sorry, but in Versailles the following year once he became king. So what is an Estates General? So an Estates General, basically, here's a picture in the back to kind of show it off. An Estates General is when the king calls each part, so the nobility, the clergy, and then the third class, in order to get advice on certain issues, okay? So this was a meeting that had representatives from each of the three estates, the clergy, nobility, and the commoners. Sometimes I like to call them because you have different parts of the third class. And they would sit in different sections. So say, for example, the nobility would sit there, the clergy would sit there, kind of like around. But then in the back, sort of I'm highlighting the back picture. In the back, you would have all the commoners. Because remember, how much did the clergy make up? 1%. The nobility, 2%. So then the commoners, 97%, took up most of the room. So the king would call an Estates General, which was like a meeting for them to decide on certain issues or on certain laws or maybe certain acts that they want to do for France. So what King Louis XVI did was he called the Estates General for each group to prepare a list of grievances. Basically, what he required is that each group would bring their list of either complaints or advice or tips or things that they should do differently. And with that, each person would have a chance to sort of speak up on behalf of their demographic, so nobility, clergy, commoners, right? Many requested, especially from the commoners, such as fairer taxes, they were being taxed too much, freedom of press, regular meetings of the Estates General because their voices aren't being heard enough. And the meeting had many people calling out the resentment on each other. So what was not very wise about this meeting is that everybody kind of sort of hated everybody. So the commoners that made up the most of the population, they would call out the nobility and the clergy, and they would say some of these quotes. Bloodsuckers of the nation who drink the tears of the unfortunate from the goblets of gold. Like, if you ever want to diss somebody pretty well, this is a good way to do it, right? Vampires pumping the last drop of blood from the people. 20 million must live on the half of the wealth of France while the clergy devour the other half. Like, they were upset. The commoners were upset that their share was not fair at all. And this would kind of come out in these Estates Generals in order to kind of show off like their feelings towards each other. So then, this is what happened, okay? This is the very sort of interesting part, or the part that's very unfair, if you look at the red part, each estate was able to cast one vote, okay, under the Estates General system. The first and second estate, they would always vote to not have to pay taxes. They would always vote to always have their lavish lives to continue. And so their two votes would always cancel out the third estate. The third estate makes 97% of the population, but the first and second estate keep voting against them. So can you see like the problem here of how unbalanced this is? So the Estates General, only men that owned property could vote, okay? So this is kind of the unfairness of the situation. Only men that own property could vote. This resulted in the representatives being mostly lawyers, middle-class officials, writers, etc., okay? But do you think the peasants owned any land? No. All right, so maybe the only part of the commoners that could vote would be that higher middle class, the bourgeoisie. These people that were voting, all of these people, even the commoners, they were at least familiar with the writings of Voltaire and Rousseau. So if you remember, Voltaire, he's the guy that I mentioned in class about how he fought for the freedom of thought and expression towards the people. And then Rousseau, he thought that noble titles such as clergy, as nobility, he wanted those to be abolished. These are the Enlightenment thinkers that we talked about before. Rousseau also was a defender of individual rights. So these people knew these writings and they were fueled by these writings in order to bring peace or order to bring normalcy or balance to this whole unfairness in the system, right? The nobility and clergy constantly voting against the third estate. So as well, they were aware of the complaints of the third estate people. And in the background, this is a very famous picture of what's called a tennis court oath. I'm going to explain here in the next slide, what is the tennis court oath? So this is what happened, okay? During this time, the third estate, so all the commoners, they said, we're done with this, okay? The declaration, in a declaration, the third estate declared themselves as now, we are not known as the third estate. We are now known as what is called the National Assembly. So from now on, when I talk about the third estate, I'm going to say National Assembly. It's the same thing. They restructured themselves and said, we are rebranding ourselves to be known as the National Assembly in order to separate themselves from the estate system. They did not think that they were well represented, so they said, fine, whatever. We're going to go make our own name for ourselves. The National Assembly, they wanted to meet up in the City Hall area in Versailles, but when they showed up to meet up, they noticed that even though they organized to meet there, the doors were locked and they were not able to go inside. So fearing that the king planned to dismiss them, everyone actually moved to an indoor tennis court that was next door, and they took what was called the tennis court oath. They basically said, fine, whatever. We don't need a city hall in order to meet together. We'll just prop up this table that you see here in this picture, and we're just going to basically have our own oath, but on the tennis court. So then you have this picture right here of all the commoners basically having their discussion and having their National Assembly meet for the first time and making this declaration on a tennis court. Tennis courts here, you could see that it's an indoor tennis court. But at this time, the National Assembly took their famous tennis court oath, and this is where they swore never to separate and to meet wherever the circumstances might require until we have established a sound and just constitution. All right, yeah, now they're being represented as who they want to be. Somebody that is actually going to have their voice be heard for that 97%. So then this is where things start getting a little bit crazy, okay? So the Bastille, this is a very famous building that resembled a lot of the hierarchy of France during feudalism. If you guys remember feudalism, it was that triangle sort of system that we talked about at the very beginning of the year where the king is at the top and it all trickles down to the peasants. But the Bastille, this was a building that represented that structure of feudalism. On July 14th, this is actually still a holiday in France today called Bastille Day. The streets buzzed with rumors that royal troops were going to occupy the capital. 800 people from Paris assembled outside of the Bastille. And Bastille, I kind of put here, it's also known as a cool pop band here in like the 21st century. We're not talking about that Bastille, okay? But instead, this was a medieval fortress used as prison for political prisoners. And so this Bastille, this building, represented these political hierarchy people. And so the Parisians, the 800 people that gathered around it, they started to demand that they wanted justice, that they wanted weapons, and the crowd, from pushing on the doors, they actually broke through and took over the Bastille. For the French, the Bastille was a powerful symbol of the tyranny, the inequalities, and the injustices of the old order. And I'm talking about the old order from medieval times that was structured and built on how they could never work their way up, but that they were constantly stuck in that third estate class and constantly misrepresented. This marked the end of absolute monarchy and the beginning of what was known as the French Revolution. People finally waking up and finally taking action and realizing our 97%, we can actually do something about this. This is still a national holiday to this day, Bastille Day. So, the Great Fear. This is what was happening, okay? This is a section called the Great Fear. There's like kind of different timelines or different periods of the French Revolution. Bread prices, just for bread, it was starting to cost 80% of people's income, and they were starting to act desperate, okay? So they started to basically loot and set fire to old manor systems. Remember the manor system that we talked about? And they were starting to steal stuff from grain houses from other places as well. Okay, so this is a big one. Oops, feudalism is completely abolished. So because of this, the National Assembly, this new group that is established, they started to create what was known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. Okay, sounds familiar. The Declaration of Independence, okay? Very, very similar. The Declaration of Independence actually, they modeled this after the Declaration of Independence, and John Locke, remember that he had a lot of influence with the Declaration. He had a lot of influence with this as well. This Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen stated that there should be equal rights through liberty, property, and security, and resistance to oppression. And this is where the very famous 3 words that represent the French Revolution come out. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. It means liberty, equality, and fraternity. And by fraternity, it means like brotherhood, like we're together. Like think of a fraternity at a college. It's supposed to signify brotherhood. We're together in this. So liberté, égalité, fraternité. Like they would now chant this in representing of the French Revolution. And this all came out of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Okay, I'm going to stop it here for part 3. Part 4, we're going to keep talking about how this built up. So take a second, switch over to part 4. Good.